I've been staring at this PlayStation 5 in my office for far too long, looking at that beautiful silky white surface, thinking, I should probably do something with that. When working on any sort of project, I have to keep in mind, hey, this has to go into the oven, and of course, this being plastic, you cannot stick that in the oven. So you have to think outside the box in a way that will allow you to remove the design, bake it, and then put it back later. So once I've got a nice smooth cover of tinfoil on there and I've got my tinfoil hat on, I decide to cover the surface in a nice thin layer of clay. As you can see, I roll it through my clay machine, get it nice and flat sheet. I had no idea what I was going to do with this as a design, so I decided to make it up as I go. Then I pulled one of my skull switch plate covers and put that right in the center as a bit of a centerpiece. And of course, no centerpiece would be complete without some juicy eyeballs surrounding it. Once I placed the eyeballs in a sort of a pentagram pattern, I got them all pressed into place and grabbed some of my eyeballs. Check out one of my other videos for the eyeball tutorial. Then I go ahead and I put a layer around the eyeballs and make it so that that's sort of like the inner part of the eye, as you'll see later, and then start using my cake decorating tool. Then I start blending it in with the background of the clay. After that, it's time to create some eyelids. So, making some Play-Doh snakes, I make a nice thin snake-like piece of clay and just start working it on in the general shape of eyelids. I wanted each individual eyeball to be in its own little section, so I start using a nice thin stretch of clay and I start sectioning off each area. And at this point I had a more general idea of what I wanted to create. And using my cake tool, I start smoothing out each individual strip of clay so that it looks like it is more seamless and more part of the fleshy design. I knew I wanted to add some stitching or some stapling to that, so you'll see later that that is why we have these sections at the top and at the bottom, and I will add some staples for that. I skipped ahead a little bit past the texturing part of the video since I will just plan on doing another video based on textures at a later date. But to save a little bit of time, we're just skipping through the texturing and going right into jamming the staples into the flesh here so it's got that nice stitched up look. Here we have the general completed design ready to go into the oven. One final look and then boom, it's time to bake. Now I use a full-size oven for creations that are too big to fit into my convection oven, and you will want to have a dedicated oven for this purpose, something you're never going to put food in again, because it's definitely got the burnt plastic vibe going once you've stuck something in there and baked it for a while. And I cook at 275 degrees and I leave it in there for about 12 to 15 minutes. Now once I've pulled out the design and it's still warm and still a little bit flexible, I put it back on the cover and I put the rubber bands on there so that it will hold the general shape of the actual PlayStation cover and not warp. After that, I pull out a razor blade and start notching and scoring the plastics so that it will adhere much better and much stronger. And of course, it's never coming off anyways, so no big deal. Then I use my epoxy resin, put a nice thin coat on both the plastic and the back of the design, and that way I know there won't be any air bubbles or gaps and it will be completely sealed all over. It's time to start painting. And when I look to go for a fleshy paint job, I looked originally at my own arm and looked at the general colors there. You've got reds, blues, purples, and tannish colors. So the best way to paint flesh is to do it in layers, since you want it to be a blended, more natural look. So I always start with red, and I hit all the high points with red, and of course the parts that are supposed to look like exposed muscle is going to be much more of a bright red. But the rest of it, I put a nice layer of red on there, and then I do a quick wipe with a paper towel so that only the trace color of red is left behind, nothing super bright, and I want it to be opaque. So it's best to do a wiping of the color and just have like a residue. After I've gotten all the red parts down, I pull out the purple and go over all the red again. I will wipe off all the excess purple color, leaving behind a more opaque version of the purple on the fleshy parts. And it's okay if it smears around to the other areas, since flesh will have those splotchy looks. And so that's not a big deal at all. It's actually desirable. I didn't want all 5 sections to have exactly the same color palette, so I decided to break it up by adding some zombie rotted green areas as well. Trying to break up the pattern, doing it not right next to each other, one there at the top and one on the side. And then once that's finished, it's time to move on to the tan color. And I use this as sort of like a highlighting color and hit all the grooves and the sides and the low parts. And then start spreading it around again with the paper towel. And no skull is complete without having it look very antique-y and old, so I'm going to knock out all the teeth and all the actual skull sections with the brown color, with the tan color, and again spreading it around with a paper towel, smearing and smudging, making it look like it's just really old and decrepit. I make sure that all the little spots that I have made with my knife, making little lines, I fill those in and then wipe it around. And then again, to break up each individual section and not make them look too similar, I'm going to make 1 or 2 of the sections much darker than the rest so that it doesn't look uniform. And on the skull here, in order to make it look old and antique, I added a bit of water to my paint to water down the brown, and then just smear that all over the skull and then wipe it away. Time to vein the eyes, and individual strands of red yarn are the perfect veins for eyeballs. Using a gloss varnish to apply, I make sure that the actual area of the eyeball is nice and wet with the varnish. Then using a paintbrush that is a throwaway brush, I get that wet with the varnish as well. And I pick up the individually separated strands and start spreading them around on the eyeballs with the brush, and also with a sharp pointed tool to help kind of direct the veins into the different parts of the eye wherever I want it to be super veiny and bloodshot looking. Final step is to coat the entirety of the design in epoxy resin using a foam brush. I like to use a 2-part A and B epoxy, mix it together, and then using a foam brush apply it nice and liberally. Snap the panels back onto the PS5, and there it is in its final form. Now, if you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe for future content.
Goodbye.